order. We'll begin with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible,
liberty and justice for all.
Before we start the meeting, I'd just like to take a moment and just offer our condolences and our prayers to the family of the Margarita student that was killed over the weekend. So if we can just have a moment for her. Thank you. I know that just in the conversations, just going back and forth a little bit, when that was announced, that really hit, everyone on our board really hard. Everything that everyone has done to keep their families safe, over the past year with the pandemic, and to just lose, a girl so tragically, I know it moved everybody as much as it did me. So I just wanted to take a moment and, send our love to her family. All right, I'd like to move to accept tonight's agenda for February 6th, 2021, if I may have a second.
Second?
All in favor? Yes?
Yes.
Yes.
Any opposed? So accepted. We are going to move on. First for our work session discussion is policy review. Looks like we have a long and distinguished list of policies to discuss. So Anor, take it away.
Well, the good news is that we don't really have that long a list. So in the first reads, there are three policies that we're putting forward. 3420 is an update that came to us through BOCES that is clarifying non-discrimination and anti-harassment within the, not the student body, but the employees in the school district. And it's mostly covering actions that one takes with various compliance officers, the civil rights compliance officers, which we happen to have two of them on this call, I believe. And it's an update that came to us through BOCES, and we've reviewed it, and it looks like we can go ahead and take the language and put it forth. Policy number 6411, use of email in the district, that has been reviewed by Nick Hill and approved with the language that's in there. There's this is again for staff and employees, and there's quite a bit of updates around the necessity of having private information in encrypted emails, and also gives advice on not falling prey to phishing and the kind of things that can really attack the whole IT system. And that has been reviewed and updated by Nick Hill, who is our IT officer. And the next one has been reviewed by Brad Halgash as the head of sports, which is around student sports and the athletic program. And again, I don't think there were any great changes to this other than making sure that the overall sports and athletic program policy jives with the Title IX provisions for which, as you know, Title IX provisions are making sure that there's an equality between male and female sports within the organization. So it covers things like booster clubs and how the sports will be handled. And there's a long policy in the second reads. I believe it's 23 pages long, which is 3421, which is on Title IX and sex discrimination, which melds with this one. So this has been reviewed by Brad Halgash, and it will be forwarded. We didn't have any changes to it. The next policy that you'll see on the list of first reads is one that we are amending from the version that we have now, which is student physicals. And there, as we've had our attorneys look over the language in there to make sure that we specify how students can have physicals within the school system, but also that their parents will be involved. And so there will be parental review and permissions given for any student physicals. And if students are found to have a disability through the physical process, how that will be handled going forward. And that is not finalized. We're adding a little bit of language to that policy right now. The annual review section, the Lewiston-Porter annual review policy, that entire section on students with disabilities is being further reviewed by the policy committee. And so we're not going to go through those as a first read tonight. We will be meeting in 10 days time, and Barbara Goschel will be with us, and we will make sure that all of those policies, which are updates from the existing policies, we'll make sure that they all are current and up to date. And we think it's going to take a little extra read than what we had in our normal weekly meeting or monthly meeting. And then the second reads are the first reads that we went through last week and last month. And there were no major changes to any of these. There were a few words changed here and there, but these are updates. Most of them were from 2017, I believe. Mm-hmm. And we're putting these forward. They will go for approval by the full board in our meeting in 2 weeks, our regular board meeting. And I don't think there's anything to point out other than that policy 3421, Title IX, sex discrimination is a very long policy that I think we've been reviewing that for about 4 months now. So I think we finally got that one nailed down. And there are a few that we have on our list here as being on hold. We are going to also put those forward for a first read. Will they be the first read in the next meeting? Okay.
If everybody is okay with them, we're going to move them to a first read.
7121 and 7212 will both be put forward for you all to review. The 7210 is a regulation on student placement. Regulation being different than a policy in that it is an entirely separate document and handbook. And Dr. Lyon is working amongst I think the building principals, but as well as some others, to flesh out that regulation and how there will be a methodology, if you will, around student placement and assessment and handling that through the appropriate channels so that there's a little more formality to how student placement and being held back, move forward. I'm not exactly sure I'm using the right terminology there, but that will be forthcoming, but that regulation, it will not be, we won't be looking at that today. And I think that's it.
Yeah.
I miss anything there, Marissa, Danielle?
No, you covered it all. Perfect.
Oh boy. Okay, great.
Thank you. Did anyone have any questions for Anne or the policy committee? All right, thank you, Anne. We're now going to discuss the 2021-2022 calendar. Mr. Casari.
Well, we're hopeful that everybody has a copy, but I hope that you've had a chance to take a look at it a little bit. Obviously, we're hopeful that we will get back to our original plan that we had worked out with the LPUT and the district, so that we can start to move forward with our early release experience on Tuesdays of the month. Again, picking up about an hour for each of those so that we can make our faculty/administrative curriculum monthly meeting experiences a little bit more focused and hearty, particularly with the we hope will be the continued rollout and development of our strategic plan. So you can see those are built in there. So what we also we have there's 3 extra days built into the calendar, recess days, holidays that we hope will come about in lieu of the snow days. So if you take a look at November, you'll notice the 12th of November. So Veterans Day is always on the 11th, and it's regardless of the day of the month. So for next year, that would fall on a Thursday. We felt that, to have the kids off on Thursday and then come back on Friday, we may be, there may be many families that don't opt to do that. So rather than try to have students miss instruction, we are offering that day as a recess day. And then if you go to the December calendar, so this year Christmas falls on a Saturday. So we have to build in a Christmas holiday for our 12-month employees. Normally that would fall on the day prior. However, they already get that day as a negotiated holiday, the 24th, Christmas Eve. So we could look to do it the day prior, but because we're going to try to opt into the new, or we hope will be the continuation of the snow day policy that the New York State Department of Education put out, we built in that 23rd as the second kind of in lieu of snow day policy. And then as you move along, if we go to the end of June, there is a strong likelihood that, well, it's not even a likelihood, the state of New York is going to pass a new public holiday for public employees, and that is called Juneteenth. Whether that actually becomes a federal holiday, much like Martin Luther King Day, I'm not sure. That's highly possible. So the state holiday, much like in Massachusetts, you may be familiar that sometimes we get to send in our taxes a bit later because they have what's called Patriots Day. It's a state holiday in Massachusetts. Currently, right now, it's proposed that Juneteenth will be celebrated on or about the 19th of June. If you're not familiar with what Juneteenth is, you may have, I've attended the Juneteenth Festival in a number, as the principal of South Park High School. I marched with the South Park Marching Band in the Juneteenth Parade, and I worked a booth, like a French fry type booth for the South Park High School at the Juneteenth in Martin Luther King Park, and I ran in their 5K race. Juneteenth is a festival that's been going on for decades in the African American community. Juneteenth honors the date on which the enslaved African Americans in Texas learned of the passage of the Emancipation Proclamation in 1865, that they were free. So the joint management team, which is all of the superintendents who deal with the State Department of Education, have recognized this in their calendar, the 20th of June, as the celebration for Juneteenth. So that has us at 180 days. But again, we don't have to build in snow days because the of the agreement that we will feel will be continued, that on snow days, we will move to a virtual learning day. So those are the 3 days that are different in the school calendar for next year. Otherwise, the school calendar looks the same. And then, of course, there's the 27th, which is, it's actually, we would be at 181 days. There's the 27th of May, which is also an in lieu of, because we would have had 182 days in this school calendar year. So this takes us to 180, but any snow days that we would need would be taken care of through the virtual experience as per the New York State Department of Education regulation. So that, I mean, that's the calendar in a nutshell. Any questions on any of that? I've had it out to the unions as well. They're looking at it. They'll offer any feedback. So you certainly can offer any feedback that you have to it.
So if we don't go forward with snow days being home days, if they cut that out next year, we know which days we're putting back on the calendar?
I'd have to move that 12th back on the calendar for sure. And then we would look at, I'd probably leave the 23rd, but we'd look at, we have the 25th, that parent-teacher conference day in May. Obviously, I mean, in March, we have as an extra day, and then the 27th for sure, that would become a school day as well in May, if we need to use a snow day. So we've got some options there as well. The adding of Juneteenth, which I think is highly appropriate, it makes it a little bit more difficult to find. It just takes away a day more or less. But I know that Niagara Falls is moving forward with that day this year.
21.
So take a look at it. It's not, it's really just for your review. I've got the unions looking at it. If you have any questions or anything, any concerns, we can talk about those in February. We would approve this in March, so we have some time to think about it. Okay?
Any other questions about the calendar?
Any questions?
Nope.
Okay. Oh no, actually, Paul, you're up again with the Public Employer Health Emergency Plan.
Yeah, so basically what, much like we have to submit an emergency plan each year, it's more or less a new addendum that they came out with a very specific form. So all of the, basically all of the information on school safety that we were required to incorporate in our plans with regard to the recovery, rebuilding, and renewing of schools, the reopening guidance has now been operationalized in that draft plan that you had to take a look at. And it's pretty straightforward. You can see it just kind of talks about the various roles and how this came about, why this came about, as a result of the pandemic. It talks about essential functions. It talks about essential roles. It talks about it gets into more specific detail on reducing risk through remote work and staggered shifts, remote work protocols, staggered shifts, personal protective equipment, all of those kinds of things. And it's a template that after the unions have taken a look at, much like they had a chance to take a look at the reopening guidance plan that we put together, we'll ultimately have to certify this on the state website by April 1st. But basically all it is just operationalizing and kind of condensing and compartmentalizing all of the work that we did in the reopening plan. There's now a specific public employer health emergency plan. Pretty straightforward though.
It seemed to be. Anyone have any questions for Paul on the plan?
Patty, did anything I missed? Patty was, I was on there, but Patty and I were spending, Patty obviously sees a lot of this. So Patty, any question, anything you wanted to add that I didn't?
No, it's a really nice summary of some of our reopening plan along with, like married to some of the state guidance.
Yes.
So it's a good it doesn't look like a summary. It's a good summary.
Whenever we need to hit, whenever we have another pandemic, hopefully in 100 years, but according to Bill Gates, it's going to happen more frequently moving forward. I guess, maybe, possible. Well, we've had pandemics recently, MERS, Ebola, SARS. I mean, all those kinds of things. It just wasn't to the magnitude of all of this. H1N1, all of that, you know. So, I mean, it's not like there haven't been these sorts of viruses out there. It's just, obviously, this one is just way more impactful. So that's that.
Okay, anyone have any questions? Okay. Claims audit review. Patty, have you here to discuss it? I mean, I don't know that looked like everything was really in order. Did you want to add anything?
There really isn't anything to discuss. We closed purchasing down pretty early. I'm now making people put in special requests if they need something. They have to justify why they're buying it now instead of, you know, at the beginning of the year. Theoretically, if you're buying stuff that you're going to use with kids, other than things that are mass consumables, you should have already purchased them. So, or the money should at least already been encumbered. So that's going fine.
Did anyone have any questions? Pretty straightforward. All right. Patty, budget discussion.
Budget discussion.
Take it away.
So yeah, so I'm gonna start by sharing my screen, hopefully. And let me get my screen up here.
Patty, let me know if you need anything with that.
I think I'm gonna be okay.
Okay.
Let's see. I wanted to start with the governor's proposal. Can you see that or no?
No.
No, well, that's not great. Now, can you see it?
No, ma'am.
No.
No.
Do you want to send it to me, Patty?
Are you a host, a co-host?
Oh, there you go. You got it.
I think so.
Yes, you have it.
I do have it. I love that I have it. Okay.
Open it up. There you go.
There we go. So I wanted to start with this because when we talk about what the proposal is, it really, there's some numbers that you really need to understand the background to. So what they're proposing is the third straight year of flat foundation aid, and then a combination of service aids. But when I spoke before of the fact that they're putting together some aids that regularly increase, like transportation aid and BOCE's aid. One of the things that I think is very deceiving is if you look at what they're proposing we're receiving this year in service aids compared to next year, it looks like this tremendous increase. But if you remember, we were closed for a portion of the year last year. So that really is a very misleading number. So it looks like they're giving us all this extra aid. And it's really still based on the prior year spending. So it's spending compared to what we anticipate this year's budget will be. So last year we were closed March, April, May, June, so for 4 months. And that 38 is based on the full year. So I want you to understand that when we look at this budget, it's not this big gift that they're proposing for us. The other thing is, if you look down here, they're doing a local district funding adjustment of negative 1.8 million, almost negative 1.9. And then if you go down to the federal COVID supplement. So this adjustment does not say COVID adjustment. It's a funding adjustment. I don't anticipate that will go away. That's why they're using that language.
It's called GEA. It's called GEA.
Yeah, really, like it or not, it pretty much is.
GEA.
And this COVID money, like, that's gonna go away. So I think we need to be really cautious, and we've been talking with our legislators and our my groups that I participate with have all been having those conversations, because that is just really, really important to really know and understand what that proposal is. Every year we look at student enrollment, and this year I found some fun reports that look at our live birth data. And this is actually done by the New York State Department of Health. So we can kind of go back and see our district compared to other districts and where we're at in terms of this should project enrollment. It's really, for the most part, for the last several years, stayed relatively flat. I think that's a good sign. That means our enrollment generally should not see big peaks and valleys. So that was kind of just like a nice thing to look at to kind of do an estimate off of.
Patty, can you just go back there for a second, Patty? Go back to the enrollment.
Yes.
The live births,
The live birth.
Yeah. So for instance, if you take a look at 2015, okay, those kids are actually now first graders. And that number is about 102 first graders. If you take a look at 2016, those kids are kindergartners. That number is about 112. So if there were 117 kids live birth, we ended up with about 102 kids in the actual cohort. If there were 124 kids, we ended up with about 112. So some of the kids go off to different experiences. So as you can see, and of course, that 2014, 92, that was also a low number. Those kids, that number's at about, which is unusual because that number's at about 100 and it's another 112. So there you saw an increase. So maybe there were some move-ins there, but it's been relatively stagnant. But when you see the live births, 2015, 2016, that number has tended to be lower. So now we come into 2017 with 112. We'll see where that all plays out.
And this year, I'm going to say, has probably been a bit of an unusual year because the non-pubs did provide the 5-day-a-week service. So I think we did lose some of our students to that just because of parent need, but I do feel like we'll get a lot of them back once we're back full time. Then I wanted to take a look at enrollment. And these are projections. What I typically do is I look at several years going back to the pluses and the minuses. And you can see that, we've had some years where we've had some pretty significant losses in our student population numbers. This year, of course, is different, but this year, listen, this is just a different year. If not for COVID, this would not be our number. And I think we just have to recognize that next year when things are different, things will be different. Because when you look at the live birth, when you look at the rest of the data, that's a very surprising number.
And
but
Patty,
yeah.
Is that that minus 74? Do you think that's kids who have gone to the non-public schools?
That's predominantly what it is in most years. We lose about 20 kids a year to non-pub. So there's a lot of things that go hand in hand with this. And we live in a moderately affluent community. And very often parents when you have a little extra expendable income and you have gone to non-pub yourself, there seems to be this legacy effect. And I'm not saying it's good or bad, it's just what it is. Where if you went to a private school, very often you want your children to go to a private school. It's about, it's a value decision. This year, I don't know that it was For some people, for sure, it's still a value decision, but for some people, they needed 5 days of daycare.
Yeah.
And we are an educational institution, and the most important thing we do is educate children. For some families, we have a dual purpose, and I think we, that's just the reality.
Sure.
But
So,
for the next 7 or 8 years, unless we see a dramatic increase, that number is going to continue to decline for overall. Now, we do pick up kids along the way. I'm not saying that doesn't happen, but for instance, this year you've got 175, 173 going out, and you've got 100 and let's say 105 coming in. Now, we pick up some kids along, so 175 kids are graduating, 105 kids are coming in as kindergartners. The following year it gets, so that numbers, that the decline is going to slow, but until we reach that equilibrium. And again, we pick up kids in 9th grade, we pick up kids along the way, so it's not completely, 70 kids every year, but it is generally a decline.
right.
The unfortunate part is that, and of course, when you have a decline in student enrollment, that generally lends to a decline in state aid. However, the cost of running our schools is not necessarily geometric like that. It's more, it's more exponential. Healthcare, things that were out of our controls like TRS, ERS, all of those kinds of things continue to grow, in terms of our labor costs. Why don't we see, why are we continuing to see growth in our budgets, even though we're seeing decline in our student populations? The cost of educating students grows at a much more rapid pace than the decline in the student population.
So I do this kind of little exercise every year to see every year as the year goes on, and really over the summer, we accrue students, and in some places we lose students. So I like to look at the 3 and 5 year averages to project our enrollment numbers. And looking forward, the picture is not as bleak. So I can get down here, let's see, center this a little bit. So if you look at where the projections fall, like Mr. Casari said, we're typically losing students, but we're not losing always at the rate that, we're not really losing at the significant rate that we did this past year. So we're not projecting the numbers to be down as much as you would think, because we do get students back during the year. So when I looked at the end of the year data this is over 5 and over 3 years, it allows us to kind of project out a cohort. That makes sense? So you can kind of follow the cohorts along. And what I did was I took each cohort and either added or subtracted based on the grade level, because we know things happen at certain grade levels. At the end of 8th grade, we usually get a nice jump into 9th grade, because we have a lot of schools in our community that only go to grade 8. Different levels, we get different amounts of students throughout the year. So it's kind of factoring those kiddos in and out.
Patty's numbers have been pretty right on over the past few years.
Yeah. So that's our enrollment in a nutshell. And I know that wasn't actually on the agenda, but that is something we look at every year, and I didn't want to lose sight of that. I'm going to show you our tax cap levy, and I'm calling this an early levy, but it's really not early anymore. Let's see if I can get this. Because now it's really at that point where the numbers are the numbers. So this year we had an anomaly. We had 3 new pilots enter the game, and you're going to see them on this board agenda. Actually, we got them very late in the year, but they start this year. So once they're approved, we will build them out this year. So I had to file them. They call it as an error and omission, but it wasn't really an error. We just didn't know about them until this month. So we're going to get some new pilots that are going to be received in this year. So you'll see that we have Swan Street and there were the solar pilots, Oya and Borrego. There's 3 of them. So those are these 3 right here. Those are added in. So what we do is we take the prior year levy. We add our tax-based growth factor. This is not CPI. This tax-based growth factor is a number that I get from the county and the state. Actually, I get it from the state, but they derive it from county data. And it's about how our community is growing. So however, what percentage they give you, and it's based on a variety of factors that are out of everyone's control. You get to multiply your levy by that to get a new levy estimate. Then you take out your pilots from the prior year. And then you take your levies, tax levies for exclusion, not included TRS. So my exclusions were what we got to write off in the prior year. So you take those out. Then you get your adjusted levy. You multiply that by your CPI. This year is a pitiful CPI. It's the lowest it's been since 2017 at 1.23%. So it's not like the 2% isn't 2% here, and it's not going to be later. Then you add back in your pilots to that levy amount, any carryover, which since I've been here, we have not had carryover. You take out your new exclusions. So your new exclusions are basically all of your capital expenses minus the aid that you get for them. As of last year, we're allowed to use the BOCE's capital expenses as well. So it's those 2 numbers minus your building aid. For us, it's minus the Greenway Fund, and that brings us to 1.2 million. For those of you who are not familiar with this, we applied for some funding through the Greenway organization, and we get $420,000 a year. And that money was actually spent on the fitness center and the high school during that project. And that pays off the long-term debt on that. So we take that out as the exclusion. That brings us to a new levy limit of $28,465,654, which is a 2.367% increase to the levy if we choose to go that high. The allowable increase in dollars is $658,000. I actually ran this through the state calculator and the numbers all came out good. So this really is going to be our final tax levy limit. Questions on this? A lot of information.
So these are our projections, but you say you've run it through the state already?
Yeah, I opened the state portal up and put all these numbers in to make sure all my numbers would match and be the same. So yeah.
Okay.
I haven't hit send, but unless a new pilot comes up out of nowhere, this is it. I will say this seems like, a substantial amount of money to go back to the taxpayers with. And it is. The unfortunate thing is 1% will probably just about cover the increased cost of health insurance. So, that's the sad part of this story. Any other questions on this? How it works? If you have questions, you can always send them to me later and I'll be happy to answer them. I know it's a lot of data to review. Next, we wanted to look at revenues. And this is not, the revenues we're going to look at right now. And I did this based on a 2.3% increase to the levy. You'll see that we have some new pilots coming in. This would be our new levy limit with that. Our new levy with that limit. Interest and penalties on real property. We just didn't get as much last year as we thought. It's funny, it was our first year with a Dropbox, so I thought we would have more people paying late and forgetting, and they actually did better. We are still planning on having international students next year, so we allocated 65,000 for that. Community ed, you know, it's going to be like a whole new year again with community ed. We did the best we could running remote programs this year, but it did not have the revenue that we had hoped, just because people are still afraid to come in. People don't know. A lot of our community ed membership, they just couldn't do the classes online, or it couldn't be taught online. So I want to try to put a reasonable number in there, and we can talk about that as we get into the process. But 35, I think, is a fair number for what we should get in revenue. Day school tuition from other districts. We do have some students that are paying for services. And then we actually have students that pay us that we get. So we provide services to other districts we provide services to kids in our district, within district. These are kids who go to private schools, but it's our people providing the service, so we get to bill them. That's what these two lines are for. Interest in real property for individuals. This is a rental. This is the bus garage, and we have daycare. Oh, I'm sorry. That's the bus garage and daycare. This is interest on earnings. We have been doing some investing. I know the rates are very, very low, but if you remember, we approved NICLAS, and we are getting a little bit of money there. So I feel like at least we're doing something with what we have in accounts. Sales of scrap and excess, not a lot of money, but something. Sales of instructional supplies. We've been trying to sell some items online when we can. We use an auction house. Refunds from prior year expenses. This is the end of the year BOCES check that we get every year. It's been a little bit, it came in this year around 210, so it's been a little higher. Unclassified revenues. These are revenues that we get paid in lieu of taxes. So some of it is the NIPA money. We get $725 from NIPA, and then we get some money from the Bridge Authority. So the bridge sits on both US and Canadian property, but it's technically Canadian owned. So they try to pay us what they believe the equivalent of our taxes would be.
And is that gonna this year?
Every year, yeah. They've been good about paying. They make a couple. They divide it up into 2 payments, but we've been getting it since I've been here. So, yeah.
It's that we talk about each year, and it's always something, as long as I've been here, that's always made me a little bit nervous as counting as the revenue, because we don't have any agreement with them. They just pay us. So, you know, to count it, I'm always worried that maybe someday they won't, but to date, they do every year.
You know, I haven't heard differently. I imagine if they, you know, I do reach out to them at the beginning of the year before we finalize everything to kind of get an estimate, and they usually estimate a little on the low side. So that's been good. And then we get a little bit of real property tax back. So this is basically our state aid, and I think it's really, like when we talked about what comes in here and what's folded in, they basically put all of these aids into one service aid. It's a lot, and it's really, you know, it's concerning. So I'm hoping this is not what we're looking at a final revenue, and I'm relatively sure it will not be, but that's about where it's at. High cost aid. So these two kind of balanced each other out, which is really interesting. Our high cost aid is going down, but our private and excess cost aid went up. So those two will kind of balance each other out, which is fine. Our building aid is what it is. It's relatively flat comparatively. Medicaid is about the same. This year, I'm hoping that we'll only appropriate 1.7. That may change. we'll just have to wait and see. And then we get into our federal funds. UPK is staying the same. Originally, we were looking at maybe a 20% deduction. They actually did take 20% out of last year's payment. They have promised that that will be back, although they have not given us a date. We just got our idea and our title grant for this year approved. So this year just got approved now with the year more than half over. But we are anticipating that we will still get those aids. I do anticipate that some of the aids will decrease just a little, only because they're based on student population. Questions on any of these?
Just to clarify for everyone, you look at and you talked about it a little bit at the beginning, but the local district funding adjustment, which is equal to the COVID-19 supplemental stimulus,
Yeah.
that supplemental stimulus was the amount that coming from the federal government to the states that was supposed to come to us.
Well, so the governor basically says for us to get that supplement, he needs to get, his original thing was he needed to get, I don't know, $3 billion or something like that. Now over time, he's kind of changed a little bit of his commentary on that. You know, the federal government is really talking about putting a big bill forward.
We don't see, if you can see, we don't see any of the actual dollars. It all is in our state aid payments. So the governor holds all the money and distributes it based on his budget director's wish, desire. We have not seen any actual dollars. There's been no specific CARES Act payment to us.
So I heard from CARES Act finally this week, and they believe that there's a school that we didn't report, but they can't tell me who. And I don't believe there is, so we're having that conversation. I had another I'm actually meeting again this week. I met last week with my contact at FEMA. Every school who has been reviewed so far has been denied, and then they put them on hold. So he believes that if we add some additional information to this application, maybe we can get it through on the next round. So I actually just sent him I sent him, you know, the governor's requirement for us to close, the requirement for us to provide lunches, all of these documents that support why we stayed open and why we had to disinfect. So I've been working with him on those things. You know, I sent these huge cost lists. I had to make copies of all of the check stubs, all of the invoices, all of the purchase orders. And now they want a per unit. So if I ordered a box of 100 gloves, how much did each glove cost? So the amount of information they're asking for is large. So hopefully something will come out of it.
They also wanted the board resolution that authorized the closing of schools for the pandemic.
Yeah, they wanted a lot of information. So
we said, what are you talking about? The governor closed the school.
Yeah, it's just been a lot. And you know, FEMA has never lived through a pandemic. So this is all new for them too. And for sure some challenges for everyone. So that's where we're at with the revenue budget that I'm not excited about. We're going to take a quick look at special education. So, you know, the numbers kind of are what they are. You'll see some of the lines have zeros in them. And those were lines where we had district codes that we no longer use as district codes because now everything has to be broken out by building. So we do have one special education teacher at one of our non-publics. That's the first salary you're looking at. Then these are special education teachers broken down by building. Anything with a 150 code that you'll see in here, that's an instructional code, so that's a teacher. When you get down into the 151s, those are our related service people, speech, OTPT. And then we get into, we have one administrator, which there's, Dr. Godshall. And then we have our teacher aides, which are 160s. Our teacher aides are broken down into technically 3 programs. Our special education, our 2110s, which is our general education, which are program aides. And that's primarily, although we do have some at all levels, it's primarily the elementary levels where they go in to assist with our young people. And then we have them on the buses. And then here we go. If we look a little further down, we have to have, so if somebody has a one-on-one aide and it is for a physical disability, if that child opts to go on a trip, we will need to provide an aide for them. Of course, this year we didn't have trips, so that was not an issue. But in the future, if we do have to provide aides for trips, this is kind of the number. We actually pay the salary to be with a student while the child is away. And we also provide them for after-school activities. In this 2250-400 line, you'll see contractual services. It's for behavior specialists, speech, which I spelled wrong, vision services, anything that we outsource to an agency.
Patty, maybe you can just briefly, in terms of our overall costs at our first run at this are pretty good. However, that $329,000 increase year to year, 135,000 of it is this area. Maybe you could explain that a little better to the board.
So when I first saw that number, I gasped just a little bit, but we are really working hard to keep more of our kids in our programs in our buildings. So we are using some additional services. So if you look down at our tuition, you will see almost a correlative negative expense in our tuition line. So by bringing in more of our services internally, we're able to keep more of our kiddos here in-house. So I think that's where the cost is. We are getting, we're getting needier and needier children. I mean, that's just, it's not us, it's everywhere. And next year is not going to be better. Next year, we are going to have kids that are going through all kinds of emotional crisis because this has been really difficult for people. And we do want to make sure that we have extra services and we have the services.
Can you also point out the fact that we also have to include budgeting for increases due to the negotiations that are coming up? You'll notice that in your 169 instructional line, an increase of about 21,000 and also 19,000 for the aid salary. So we are.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Patty.
I'm sorry. So we are looking at several contracts coming up right now, the clerical, the teacher aides and monitors, the custodial staff. We've had this conversation over and over again. We really are struggling to find clerical staff right now because the county jobs and the state jobs are starting between $5 and $7 an hour more than ours. So it has just been impossible for us to get employees. It's been possible to keep employees. I myself am losing my accounts payable person because she took a job in Niagara County with the state for $7 an hour more. I just can't, I can't match it. And quite frankly, if minimum wage does go up to $15 an hour, these units are under that. We're going to really struggle. So we're going to try to do the best we can at the end. We have some estimates in here. I don't know if we're going to be able to keep them that high, but we're going to try to do, we know we have to do something because right now we're just not competitive. So what you're seeing is our early estimate of those salaries.
Yeah, and you're also seeing our early estimate of our BOE services, which we always look very closely at, although it's not a huge increase this year.
I don't have all the numbers yet. They I have our Erie 1 numbers and I have some of the ON BOCES numbers, but I don't have all the ON BOCES numbers yet. So we'll have to look at that at the next meeting.
But those ON BOCES numbers are going to be 1%, under 2%.
Right. So that, yeah, that could be very, very helpful. Okay. We're gonna look at transportation next. So transportation, there's really, the same thing. Part of this is my salary. I put 10% of my salary in the supervisory line for transportation so that my salary can be partially aided. I can't put more than 10% in, but at least that will get us something back. The transportation secretary is part of our transportation, is part of Debbie's salary. Same thing. She doesn't do it full time, so we can't charge full time. We do have some bus monitors still on staff. We have lost a few. So we are going to, depending on what our student needs are, I tried to keep it at around the same level. So what you're seeing there is really just breakage. And then we have some contractual items, our subbinder or a transbinder and just the routing software. And that's also down here.
So,
These are-
Patty, just so everybody understands, when Patty uses the term breakage, that's when a veteran person retires and we have to hire new. The difference between those two salaries is considered the breakage.
Thank you. So on our runs, we have a 5-year contract with Stay, and this year the contract was 2.5% increase. We get aid. So we get aid on our general runs, on our private runs, on our BOCES runs, and our special education runs in summer school. We do not get any aid on sports, field trips, music. And we don't get 100% aid on this. So we have an aid ratio, but then on top of that, we transport all of our children, no matter where they live. We don't get aid on any children that lives within 1.5 miles of district. So you will see that what we spend on transportation isn't necessarily what we get back. But that's just how it works. I put a little bit more money back into gasoline because I think we're already starting to watch the prices go up, and I feel like we need to be conservative with that. This, what I budgeted for transportation, is a full program. It's as if everyone's back and everything's back up and running, and that is our hope for next year. So these are all based on the contracts that we already have in place. Questions? General questions about the budget?
I don't have a question about the budget, but I do have something I want to say about the minimum wage increases and the challenges to finding people. And that's just that, I fully support that these people should be making more money, and the fact that we have allowed our contracts to get so far out of whack with what's going on in the rest of the state is kind of a shame. And it's unfortunate that the newer people have been thrown under the bus basically in order to do whatever they have to do. But my bottom line, what I meant to say is that it's incredibly expensive to continue to have to recruit, and it's incredibly expensive to continue to have to train. And I certainly hope that we can come to some kind of conclusion that we can get people paid for what they're actually worth for the jobs that they're doing.
Agreed.
We're with you.
I know. We just got to find the money for it.
Yeah, I'd really like to do that sooner rather than later, because I think ultimately as a significant employer, it helps the overall economy, number one. Number two, we just can't find people. We just can't fill these positions.
Well, and two, the work that we're asking so many people to do is just more difficult and requires more skill than it used to. Just to be some of the entry level jobs just really aren't all that entry level anymore. They require some skill and some people who are smart and can do some work.
Without a doubt, they require significant ongoing training.
Yeah.
I'll use our aids and monitors, for example, the fact that now that we have all of these very specific building level safety plans and health plans and IEPs and it runs and behavioral issues that aides are specifically, they require ongoing training for them to stay current in their positions. It's not just a walk in, walk out type position.
Agreed.
And I'll use substitute teachers for an example. We continued, and that's something that we're going to look at again. We have to look at again this year. I just heard recently an advertisement for a local landscaping firm offering up to $800 a week for landscape labor. Currently, right now, we're not even paying our substitute teachers, certified substitute teachers, $20 an hour.
Yep.
And we wonder why we can't get people. They could go work as a landscape laborer and make $250 more a week than they can being a substitute teacher.
And they're probably paying their student loan.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know we do have to be respectful of our taxpayers, and we do have to be respectful of, the growth. However, we cannot not recognize the issue that we face to keep and retain good people.
Well, and what it might come down to is that we have to suck it up one year and give up something else that we were hoping to get so that we can make this correction. And once this correction is made, then it sustains itself going forward.
Correct. And right. And up to this point, we've been trying to do it all. I don't disagree with you. That said, there are some hopeful things here on the appropriation side that we are looking at. We learned today some things with health insurance and things like that. So there are opportunities. We do see some opportunities within this budget beyond this preliminary look into Patty's estimates. Would you agree, Patty?
I agree. We had a very productive health insurance meeting today. Well, I said, during my initial tax cap that the increase that if we stay where we are now, the initial increase we're looking at is about a 9% increase. But we are investigating the opportunity to self-fund, and I think that could be very fruitful for us, not just in this year, but moving forward. I also wanted to share with you, somewhere in here, I have my ERS and TRS, your news from the office.
They're up very
Both are up just slightly, not enough to impact the tax cap, but just enough. ERS is going from 14.6 to 16.2. TRS, let me see where I put TRS here.
It's like 8 to
Yeah,
9.
TRS is,
It's up about 1.3%, I think.
I think, yeah. Many things in here already. That's the state aid factor analysis. Huh.
I believe it's 1.3%. I believe.
I think it is. I think it's going up 1.2%. So those are expenses that aren't going down either. So we have to find offsetting revenues. Paul and I are looking at a couple different ways of supplementing our expenses, whether it be through energy or, like I said, we're looking at the health insurance again. I think we'll have some opportunities coming up. And we do have some expenses that we had this year that we won't have next year. So for example, we won't be doing the building condition survey. Our lead testing is done. So some of that money comes back into the budget, which is good.
And quite frankly, we know we're seeing, we are having our staffing discussions right now with our building principals. And we are always being very conscious of the declining enrollment and how we can right size ourselves. But at the same time, recognizing that we want to move program forward and try to be respectful of people's sometimes 2, 3, 4, 5-year commitment to us, and just putting them out on the street.
Patty, I had one question. Just with all of the PPE, all of the different things that we had to purchase, last year going into this year, and then for this year, how much of that are we looking at having to replace for next year? Like, how much of that was consumables? Do you have any kind of a number as to what we?
So we actually have a 6-month supply of everything. So listen, we buy new air filters every year. These are a little bit more expensive than the ones we typically buy. But that's not, that's not going to make or break us. In terms of PPA, like I said, we had 6 months worth. I don't know what next year is going to hold.
Oh, I know.
So we're budgeting as if it's a normal year. If we have another year like this, honestly, we're gonna have to look at, what are we gonna supplant with? I have enough masks. We've been buying gloves, and listen, if we have too many gloves, we use them to clean anyway. The masks, for the most part, we're not buying a lot of disposables. Most people are bringing in or wearing their own, or wearing the ones that we provided. We do have some additional ones from the ones we provided, because remember, when we bought them, we really didn't know how many kids were coming in or how many were remote. So we do have some additional supplies of those. The cleaning supplies are a little bit more expensive, but we're just buying different ones. We always had to clean.
Right.
So that, we're buying a higher grade sanitizer. But I'm not feeling like that's going to send us over the edge this time. The big things we own, the spray guns, the desk shields, like the bigger things we have in place now. The decals we'll leave on until we don't need them. A lot, the signage, a lot of the stuff I think we're going to be okay with. It was the big upfront cost. I mean, we put a door in. We had to put a door in. We had to create spaces for isolation rooms. The upfront costs were high.
Yeah, on the learning side, the Apex program, and the teachers that we needed to support who became fully remote, to help us with that program, B, because of their need to not to come into school due to their health concerns.
So are we looking at continuing that for next year as far as for budgetary concerns?
Yes, we do recognize that we will probably be in some kind of a similar scenario next year when we start the school year. However, we don't feel that we're not budgeting as much for the Apex program for next year.
Okay.
The same with staffing. We know that there may be remote students still, but I don't think we'll need the same level of staffing either. We'll still need staff dedicated to that, but I don't believe at the same level.
And I know that's getting ahead of what we're looking at today, but I know it's on everybody's mind. So.
We've been having a lot of questions about it, and so TRS is coming in at 9.8%.
Thanks, Patty.
So I found it. I knew I had it here.
But there is a great likelihood that we will be in some form of a hybrid model again as we go into the school year. I don't see, and unless these movements that are afoot, the hashtag #FightFor5 is something that you may be familiar with. That is something that has surfaced here in Lewiston-Porter. However, these movements are developing all across the state, both organically, and there are some that are being more formal and taking a legal approach. So you know, you can see what has happened and I could be entirely wrong. We could be in a different scenario. But I would say that there are still going to be families that are going to be allowed to opt out, and they will take advantage of that.
We're going to have vulnerable people for a
Yeah.
long time. Yeah.
For sure. And I don't envision a scenario that schools are not required to support and service those folks.
Mhm.
You know, it is what it is, and they are our students, and we need to recognize that, this thing, pandemic, is probably going to take two years to at least run its course, if not longer. It did in 1918. I wouldn't be surprised if it ran the similar. We're still just a year into it. I know it seems like forever, but it could easily run another year. Even with the vaccine out there on the table, it's going to take time. And then there still has not been any sort of discussion about how that's going to play out with individuals 16 or under,
Yep.
for sure.
Understood.
But nevertheless, I do think we're going to be I think we'll be in a better position. I hope we'll be in a better position, but I do think there's going to be some form of what we're doing moving into next year.
And I mean, we have to plan for that budgetarily. So.
Right. But we'll fight for 5.
And there's a lot that's going to have to come into play, both, public health policy, and before that can even be considered. I mean, that's what everybody wants.
Sure.
So
Sure we do. There was a time when we actually did that. I don't know if you remember.
we did. We did it really well.
Yeah, actually.
I don't think anybody understands how much extra work it is for everybody to do it this way. There's so many people in the community that I hear talk about this, like as if they think it's easier for us. This is not easier by any means. It's not cheaper. It's not easier for the kids. It's not easier for the teachers. It's not easier for the administration. We'd all prefer to be back in school 5 days a week and for this to be over.
And I know you touched a little bit on that, Patty, with the looking at the special education numbers, but I mean we had some conversations last week about just the mental health issues that are happening right now and what we can do right now to support that. But it's looking too at the budget of what we're going to do as far as social workers and psychologists, and just what the needs are going to be next year. I know that those conversations are all happening, but I know that's going to have
But if you notice, that number didn't look too bad. I mean, the $329,000 run at it is significantly less than we've seen in the past. So that's actually not.
And I think, I think you're right, Jody. We have to be aware of the fact that, for many of us, like, some of this has been a gift for me. I got to stay home with my kids and have dinner every day. There are some people who are home with their abusers.
I know.
I've been saying that since the beginning.
So we are going to need the additional support for our kids. We are.
I know. And this has not been easy on anyone. And, it has been really difficult on students of all ages, so I think we all understand that.
Yeah, it's going to be a really interesting transition back for us. And there's the social emotional piece, but there's also like a big academic piece. Our kids haven't been in front of their teachers as much as they probably need to be. So we'll have work to do on both ends.
And those kind of conversations will be for our next budget.
Yes, that's my lead-in for Dr. Lyon when we do the instructional piece.
Can't wait.
Opening it up to the rest of, to the board. Are there any other, questions about this budget, or, what we've looked at so far? I know it's just so hard in a Zoom just to tell like what everybody's thinking. So Danielle, Charlotte, Anne, Jen, anything?
No,
Okay.
nothing here for me. I know Patty and Paul work endlessly on this and the projections. I just always hope that they hold, you know.
And there is one thing too for the newer board members, and I know we've been kind of going over some of this as we've gone along, but the executive budget that we have in front of us, you know, you can almost look at it as almost like a worst case scenario. He's probably not going to take more money away, you know, in any of these particular line items or in anything. It usually going forward, it'll either hold or maybe increase as, you know, the legislature gets involved and they all duke it out. So that is one thing to take into consideration too. Is almost like a worst case scenario. So until we have actual numbers from the state, you know, it's tough to get, you know, to, you know, it's not as catastrophic as maybe it seems. So I hope I summed that up. Well.
No, that's really it. These are a lot of these numbers. Some of them are hard numbers right now. Some of them are not.
So, well, if no one has anything else for this particular part of our budget discussion, then I'd like to move on to new business. So I'd like to move to approve NA1, approval of the authorization to release an easement previously held by Lewiston-Porter Central School District on property facing Creek Road on the property south of the district between the district and Fletcher Road.
Second.
Any discussion? I think we're all up to date. I'm really glad that we were able to resolve this for the homeowner as easily as this ended up being done. It seemed pretty daunting at the beginning, but I'm glad that that we were able to do this so that they can move forward. So all in favor?
Yes.
Yes.
Any opposed? So carried. I would like to move to approve the Lewiston-Porter 5-year long-range plan, and we reviewed that at our last meeting. May I have a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
I did notice that that one error was resolved. Just commenting that there was a revision.
Yeah, Patty made that.
And that is one of those, I know I felt for you when you're going through that. Sometimes when you look at something so many times, you move something. So anyway, thank you. Anyone else? Any discussion? Okay, all in favor? Yes?
Yes.
Yeah.
Any opposed? So carried. I'd like to move to approve NA3, approval of the pilot agreements as listed. If I may have a second.
Second.
All in favor?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. Any opposed? So carried. I would like to then move to approve PRA, and that is the administrative personnel. It is retirement of Dr. Barbara Godshall. If I may have a second.
Second.
Just quick discussion. You know, I just wanted to really take a moment just to congratulate Barb. I know we had an opportunity to do that, you know, at least for now, but in person. But I wanted to just, again, the decision to retire is a huge decision in someone's career. So congratulations to Dr. Godshall. All in favor? Yes.
Yes.
Any opposed? So carried. I'd like to move to approve PRI. That is instructional. That is a resignation from athletic position. If I may have a second.
Second.
All in favor? Yes.
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 Opposed? So carried. And I would like to move to approve PRNI. Those are the non-instructional personnel. We've got 3 retirements, Beth Van Dusen and Janet. So we actually want 2. Janet's just in 2 different places. So that is the retirement of Janet Cirillo and Bev Van Dusen, and resignation of Debbie Coulter. If I may have a second.
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 And again, congratulations to Janet and to Bev. They will be very missed, but congratulations on their retirements.
For sure.
All in favor?
Yes.
Yes.
Any opposed? So accepted. All right, then if there is nothing else for the good of the order, I would like to move to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor? Yes?
Yes.
Yes.
All right.
Thank you,
Good
guys.
night.
All right. Good night,
Good night,
everyone.
everyone.
Have a
You're
good
back.
night.
Night.
2
Good
weeks.
night.